Haste. Man, what an interesting game. I saw this game, you know, like some footage floating around the internet a while back at this point, and then I played the demo at GDC, and it was really fun, and I was really looking forward to the full release. And now that it's released, boy oh boy, I have a lot of things to say about it. So as always, first off, I want to talk about some of the audio visuals and the overall vibe of the game, including the lore and story and all that kind of stuff. So visually, the game is really solid. For a 3D indie game, you know, usually those are the ones that I would say are trickier to nail visually. But I think the game looks and feels really good. The biomes are pretty different from each other visually, which feels pretty awesome. I mean, the environment really does feel like you're just traversing a huge world. Even in the hub, I mean, even just right now, currently, this is just absolutely beautiful. And I just kind of love just running around the hub, just looking at the different areas, not having to worry about anything, just having a jolly old time. It's very empty. I do wish there were maybe... I mean, I get the point why it's empty, but I think they could have had like, some little Easter eggs, some fun little things in there potentially to spice it up a little bit. I think the VFX are pretty solid. You can really get a good feel. When you go faster, the effects around the screen really do make you feel like you're going fast. The fact that your shoes change color the faster you go, these kind of little details are really nice. In terms of the story, they've actually put a lot of effort into the story. Kind of like it. There's I'm not gonna obviously get into spoilers, but there's a whole mystery the entire game that they're really trying to build up to. And you have a bunch of characters that you're gonna be talking to, and they each have their own little personality. And it's all done through reading dialogue with just little sounds that accompany it, like, you know, ha, yeah, oh, what, kind of stuff. So it's not full-on voice acting, but it still gives each character, you know, a bit of realism, all things considered. I would say that the story is decent, all things considered, and I do like the characters in the story. One of my biggest issues about the story is actually the way that it can sometimes really stop the pacing of the game. Now, obviously, this game is all about going fast, so I do feel like just inherently that's going to be pretty interesting to figure out how to, you know, make sure that you don't slow down things too much if you add too much content and too much things that are outside of pure gameplay, because, you know, you're going so fast, and then when something stops, it can be a bit of a big like jump in pacing, all things considered. And unfortunately, a lot of the story and dialogue comes in randomly and spontaneously in between levels. So for instance, you'll be going from one level to another, you just completed the level, you're waiting for a loading screen for the next level, and then there's just a conversational dialogue thing, and you weren't expecting it. And that can really slow down the pacing a little bit. It's not super annoying, all things considered, but it did make me sometimes just kind of skip dialogue, even though I was interested in the story, just because I was really into, you know, my fast-paced, you know, thing. Not to mention that the dialogue is just, there's nothing going on visually outside of just seeing the characters, which, you know, kind of like in Hades, that's totally fine, but Hades is not as crazy fast-paced as this. So that's the only thing, but I do think the story is nice. And also, they have a kick-ass, like, almost anime intro when you start playing the game with, like, you know, the credits of people that worked on it and everything. And that's awesome. They put a lot of effort to it. And right before starting the game, I was like, oh, hell yeah, I am already invested. So I really like that. So overall, yeah, vibe-wise, it's pretty solid. I like the main character too. She's pretty cool. She doesn't really care about things at first. She's just someone who just runs from world to world and doesn't really think much more of that. And then obviously as the story gets more intense, things change. But yeah, so I kind of like her. The music is fantastic. I love the music. It's super, obviously fast-paced, super energetic, super satisfying. Yeah, I really like it. Really cool. Not much else to say about that. This is a small detail, but between levels during a run, the music updates after you start the next level. You finish a map, and then you start the next map, and you're already starting to run as the music fades out into the new theme. Which, it's a small detail. I don't think many people even realize it, but to me, I do think that it actually would really help with the immersion if that was done properly, where the music starts the moment you get into the next level. Again, small things, but as you may, if you don't know me, I like getting into details. So art, visual, vibe, all that stuff, really solid. It is just a blast to just look at the game and just see someone playing is always pretty satisfying and enjoyable. Let's talk about the gameplay. Obviously, The mechanics of the game is you can run around and you have control. You actually have quite a bit of control. So in this instance, with this character, you can change where you're going to be facing and where you're going to be landing and all that stuff depending on your actual camera view. But you can also move your character left and right. Now, when you're going very fast, it's very minimalistic. But all things considered, little details are pretty freaking important, like in this game. So I can go left and right, but I can also control my field of vision, which gives me a lot of control. Outside of that, there is if I press spacebar, I will be dashing down, and this is where most of what you're gonna be doing is really making sure that you successfully stay pressed on spacebar to really get the right momentum to land, so you can get perfects. And perfects is all about trying to land perfectly in line with the floor. If I press spacebar like this and I land here, it's just going to be okay. Now, okay will slow down my speed, but more importantly, also not give me much energy. And my energy is that little yellow bar that you see. So every time I get it perfect, it fills up. But if I get something other than like perfect, then it doesn't fill up as much. And that energy bar is very important because it allows you to use your special ability. Now, there are 4 special abilities. You start with one. You start with the hoverboard. And the hoverboard allows you to get more speed. As you can see, like as I'm using it, you get more speed. That's great. I'll talk more about that specifically later on. But I like to use the Sage's Cow, which is a little jump. I can do whoop, and I can get an extra jump, and that uses a certain amount of energy. So that's pretty much all that you really have going for. You also have active items that you can find during runs that you can activate, but they're not super important. And honestly, I would say almost half of my runs I don't even have an active. So what we just talked about is pretty much all that you're going to be really focused on. And that's already a lot. And it takes a while to really master it. Overall, the gameplay is obviously very satisfying, very enjoyable. Does it get old? Not really, thanks to the roguelike elements. I do think there's a part of me that wonders if there could have been a little bit more to the gameplay once you get further along in the game. Now, currently, the specials that you have, right, the little flappy wings, the board, there's 2 others. They're cool, but from what I've seen people talk about and from my experience, it really does feel like most people either try one very quickly and disregard the rest, just stick to one, and others don't even actually unlock the others because they cost so much in the meta progression, which I will be talking about. So I kind of wish that maybe they were actually, I don't know, done differently, where you're kind of forced to play around with them, or you have 2 at the same time. This might be a little bit much, but there's a part of me that kind of wish I could have the hoverboard and the wing flap, because I think they really both serve completely different purposes. I'm just sad that a lot of people are going to be missing out on some of them because you're just kind of stuck with one, and most people don't really want to experiment with that in my experience. But what I will say, one of the most satisfying aspects that I've had in this game was the wing flap. I actually saw most people saying that it was a pretty terrible special, and everybody said that they should just stick to the hoverboard. And this really shows one of the coolest aspects of this game is how much skill impacts how well you'll do. Because basically, I only used the wings, and like it took me solid 2 hours to really get to understand how well you can use this wing, so you can go as fast as the hoverboard, which is all about speed. If you use the wings effectively, you can really create crazy chains of perfects and just continuously go faster and faster. I love the wings, and I think it's really cool that I felt rewarded by just getting more and more comfortable with this ability that at first seemed pretty terrible. That's definitely something that I adore in this game, is how satisfying it is to feel more and more comfortable with the game and to be rewarded for it, which is awesome. A few other positive notes that I have as well. These are smaller, but I think they're really cool. When you start a run, you have your traditional kind of like Slay to Spire pathing. And in this instance, because they want to kind of keep things constantly being at fast pace, you can decide to automatically go through an entire path. You can map out where you want to go from like early on, and it will automatically go from one area to another, which is kind of a small detail, but it's a nice little detail because it really kind of pushes you to be like, okay, well, you know exactly what you want, and then you don't have to worry about, having to select the next level as you're really into the fast pace of things. So that's a nice little detail. The roguelike elements within the run are good. Basically, you have normal levels, elite levels, events, which can be some really cool stuff. shops, and then at the very end, the boss. And I think that's about it. Oh, then there's also the resting site to gain more health. Yeah, I mean, the events, some of them are really cool, giving you like mini games with an entire new map and like completely different gameplay. I love those. Unfortunately, they're pretty rare and far in between. Sometimes you're just going to be offered a random item. Those are kind of whatever. Sometimes they're just temporary buffs, which feels pretty terrible in my opinion. Overall, I do like the events. I think there can be some pretty cool stuff. The resting site is pretty useful if you've lost a life. That being said, I think they should also have something if you have full health, because sometimes you're kind of forced to go through one of them and you're at full health and you get absolutely nothing for it. And a lot of games give you an extra, like another thing you can do instead, right? So maybe like slightly increase like a stat if you're at full health, or you could choose health versus stats. I think that would be nicer. But it's a small thing. Sometimes you come across an NPC when you're at the rest site, which can be fun. In that case, it doesn't really ruin the pacing because you already know you're going to a rest site. So it's nice to talk to a random NPC to get things going. Shops are cool, obviously. That's where you get most of your items. The elites, I mean, I don't know how they're called, but like the hard levels with the little spikes around them, they're definitely challenging. And they create, I kind of wish there were different kinds of elite ones because they're always the same. Like, yes, they will each have different obstacles, but I kind of wish, like, visually that you could have different ones as well. It's not a huge deal. I still think it's pretty cool. They're pretty hard, and you get rewarded with a item at the end that you can choose from 3, and depending on how fast you go, there will be increased rarities, which I think is really cool. I think overall, the roguelike elements in terms of what you can pick during your run is pretty solid. In terms of the items, at first, I thought the items were pretty boring, and the more you unlock more items, the less boring they get, I would say. It's hard to get, like, synergies going. There are sometimes ways to get synergies. For instance, I just did a run, and I got an item that makes it so that, like, if I collect sparks, I take damage permanently. But I get a bunch of sparks in return passively. And I realized, oh, well, now I can try to grab a bunch of health upgrades and health regen, because usually health regen, you just need 1 and 2, and then you don't really care about it. But then I realized, oh, that opens up so many build possibilities. You can just go all in on just getting a bunch of that. So that's cool. But early on, a lot of the items are going to feel a little underwhelming. And I think that's also attributed to the fact that some items are just much more powerful than others, even if they're commons. Some commons are just so much better than rares and stuff like that. There's a few balance issues in that realm, I would say, especially since health is not necessary if you play well and if you have already other stuff. Like, you just need 1 or 2 health items, and then the rest you just want better energy to be able to flap your wings more or use your hoverboard, and speed, which is boost. So sometimes if you get offered a bunch of health stuff and you're like, I don't care about health stuff right now. So anyway, but overall I would say they're pretty enjoyable, and then you can really change your build. The bosses are hit or miss. I'm just gonna be frank. Some are really cool in concept. Some, yeah, I kind of wish utilized more of the things you find throughout the run more. I probably said that pretty terribly, but there are some bosses that, like, you can't use, for instance, a mechanic that is called close call. If you run past a thing close to you, you get a close call, and a lot of items trigger on close calls. So when you're running during a level, you will get a bunch of close calls, but not so much during bosses. The same goes for sparks. Sparks being the currency that you pick up. There are very few sparks in bosses, but there's a bunch in the levels. So you get a bunch of spark synergies, and that feels great during levels, but then you do a boss and you're like, oh, okay, well, that's kind of useless. So kind of wish they played a little bit more with all the different items for the bosses. But overall, I do think the bosses have some pretty cool mechanics. They look cool the first time you see them. They do, unfortunately, repeat themselves, except for the final boss. And without getting into too much spoilers, the final boss is really cool in concept, but I would say pretty poorly done in execution, mostly because that one really just scraps a lot of the things that you're using during runs. So if you have a build that's really good for the run, it might be completely useless for the final boss, which just feels terrible. But that's something specific, and I'm not going to get into details. It is a cool fight, all things considered. Another great aspect to this game is the fact that they listen to feedback. The creators of the game, they released the game. There was a lot of people that complained about certain things, and they released a patch really quickly that addressed a lot of issues that people had. And that's awesome. Again, that's one of the reasons I love the indie industry so freaking much, is because you can do that. And developers who do that, for me, is just so awesome. So once again, I really want to emphasize how great that is. I am currently playing after the first major patch. So I did see a lot of people complaining about certain things that apparently were fixed. I didn't play it before the major patch, but again, I did finish this game after the current major patch, and I still have a lot of things that I'm looking forward to sharing. And that also means that I'm expecting them to hopefully continuously update the game for the best for everybody. And lastly, in terms of like little cool details in this game, is the accessibility. Right now, if I go to my settings and I go on difficulty, you can adjust pretty much anything you want, and that's awesome. The developers know the game is really hard, and they also addressed that in the recent patch. You can increase the amount of obstacles, the speed, the damage taken, the item cost, the landing precision, and the overall difficulty, which is awesome. They don't really tell you that, which is unfortunate. I had to figure that out on my own by just going into settings, and I kind of found that. So I kind of wish that things were like that they would have told you early on, because I think a lot of people might be discouraged by the difficulty of the game and then not play it, even though they could have just reduced the difficulty and actually have a really good time. Because again, once you get comfortable with the game, it feels absolutely amazing. And if people are not going to get into the game just because they weren't able to get used to it, that's a shame, because what you could do is just reduce the difficulty at first, get used to some of the mechanics, and then bring it back to normal, and then experience it in its default setting. Yeah? So yeah, I really love that. I just wish it was communicated better. All right, now those are honestly a lot of the positives, and I gotta say that positive outweigh the negatives. Just the overall game is just so satisfying, even if I have a lot of minor things I wish were tweaked. So I want to preface that before I get into some of the things that I personally wish could be changed or adjusted. So that's something to keep track of, because right now I am loving it, and I would recommend to anybody who thinks they're going to have a good time with it, because if they think they're going to have a good time, they probably will. But there are a few things that I am not a fan of in this game, and so let's talk about some of those. First off, I think my biggest issue with this game, and is actually something that I might be alone on this, and so if you don't change it, I totally get it, because maybe some people like it. I'm not a huge fan of the life system in this game at all, and for many reasons. Basically, you have health, and I like the health. I think the health is done pretty well. You take damage when you hit something, or if you're not going fast enough. There's a lot of ways to take damage, but when you lose all your health, you restart the level, and I don't understand that personally. I find that very sad, because first of all, it really does ruin the pacing personally of the level, because you have to restart something. And I mean, even though the gameplay is enjoyable, you kind of want to go to the next area. You really want to go to the next area. You don't want to backtrack. So not only are you backtracking, but also that means that if you have a bad build and you have a very, very hard level that is randomly generated, that just happens to be harder than the others, you might lose all 3 lives, and there's nothing you can do about it. While if you didn't have to restart, and instead, when you lose a life, you rewind time and you like maybe start slower, like in slow motion, and then it goes back up to speed, and then you can continue, then that means that even if you have a terrible build, and even if you're very unlucky with how hard a level is, you can still finish it. And not only that, it also means that lives are more important. Because currently, if you have a terrible build and you have like, I don't know, 10 lives, which you can't have. You can only have like 4 or 5, I forgot. But imagine you could have 10 lives, but you have a terrible build. You might just lose all your lives. It doesn't matter. I mean, yeah, you restart the level every time, so you might get a little more comfortable with it. But I feel like it would be much more rewarding, and it would give much more premise to the lives if they were actually used as a way to, you know, like not die and continue on, and you just have 1 less life. And so for me, I just really wish that was changed. I know it's a major change mechanically, so I don't expect it to change, but it's a shame because I don't like it. And the thing about it as well is for bosses, it's the same deal. Bosses can be long. And when you die to a boss, you just restart the fight instead of continuing where you left off. I wish bosses were harder, potentially, but again, you had the life system so that you could, you know, try to use every life accordingly, because right now it doesn't matter if you have 3 lives or not. It's all dependent on the build. So I really don't not like that for bosses, especially the last boss. And the last boss with the life system doesn't feel great. And another thing in regards to the life stuff is when you die and you restart the level, you might think that you restart, you know, as you were when you started the level, but no. The game keeps track of any cooldowns, any energy used other than your life. Your health is back to 100 and you lose a life, right? But the thing is, right before you die, you're probably going to be using all your energy because you were flipping out or like you're close to dying, so naturally you need to use your special ability to try to survive. So odds are you're going to restart the level worse than when you came in, because when you came in, you usually have some amount of energy to play around with, but when you die, you've used it all. So now you restart the level worse. And you might have also used one of your active items that have a cooldown, and now you don't have that cooldown anymore. It just feels very unfair, and I don't know. I don't like it. But again, I don't know if other people think the same way as I do in this regard. If they don't change it, I get it. That's fine. But there's a world where I wish that was just done differently from the start. Okay, another thing, and this actually, while I'm recording this, I might have actually solved that issue, but basically, when you do a shard run, you collect items, you get to the boss, and then you beat the boss. And when you finish that, you get permanent currency that you can get for meta progression, which we'll be talking about in a moment. But you can also continue running endlessly. And I thought that was the endless mode. Now, I'm just realizing that maybe that's not the case because I just discovered something in the hub as I'm just running around right now. But continue running right now after doing a shard is really underwhelming to me, because basically you just go from one level to another without stopping for events. There's no more events, there's no more bosses, there's no more shops, there's nothing. It's just running without anything else changing. The thing chasing you goes faster and faster, so you are going to eventually die, but you don't get stronger, which is just so sad because I want to get stronger in this game. It's so cool to get items once you play this game a lot, because again, when you start a new run, you always start exactly the same. So it does get a little repetitive when you get started on a run after you've played this game a lot. So yeah, I kind of wish that the endless mode after clearing a shard was either a map that's infinite, so you don't feel like you're going from one level to another with no real, reason. Like if it was just one single map that is endless, kind of like Temple Run, or that you continuously at least, get some shops every 5 levels. You can at least, get stronger and stronger and, feel like you're not just running with the build you had. I mean, again, I thought that was the endless mode. Now I'm actually wondering if there is a separate endless mode, so I might have to, get back on that. But I guess that brings me to the items. Okay, so we talked about the items, how cool they can be, and, they're quite well done, but you don't get enough of them, in my opinion. And that's also, again, in line with the endless thing, right? Because the runs are pretty short, all things considered. You're going to get to the final boss of each shard pretty quickly. Like, I usually fight the boss with, like, I don't know, like 5, 6 items, maybe? But a lot of them can synergize with each other and are not massive, and I think you could really bump that number up. Now, I do know that in the patch that they just released, apparently that was even worse. You could barely buy anything. They downed the price. They got a lot of ways to get more items. I think they should do it even more. I think you should be able to buy even more items, and that you should be able to, once you're done with the boss, if you want to continue playing, and you can get even more items. Because I think items is really what separates the different runs currently, because the gameplay, again, is super fun, but it's still always the same, right? I also wish you could, have a little bit of something to start off with. Because currently, until you find your first shop or your first event, you have nothing. And that's kind of annoying, especially in the higher shards. The game gets really, really hard, and without any items, man, it's rough. So getting things started can be a little iffy for me. I kind of wish that, especially in the later shards, that you always start with a random item or something in that regard, just to make it feel like there's some sort of cool customization at the start, and other than just selecting your special, which again, most people are going to stick to the one they're comfortable with. So yeah, so I like the items. I just wish there were more, even more than the recent update. So there is meta progression in this game, right? And the meta progression is pretty minor, all things considered. You do get more health, more max energy, more sparks to find, which is the currency, during levels, which is a pretty cool concept. I like that a lot because I can really synergize with certain items that allow you to, like when you get more sparks, some stuff happens. So I really do like that. Right here, these are all where all your NPCs are. Again, all these you can have conversations. Those are the ones that you can talk throughout your adventure. Yeah, this guy right here, the captain, is where you can get all your meta progression. Meta progression, I think things are too expensive. Simple. It takes too long to get a lot of these, especially since the higher difficulty you can do does not seem to give you more of those. And again, the issue is these abilities you get, you have to unlock them using those shards, which is also one of the reasons why I think people are not going to be testing them much. Because right now, if I go to this guy, and he has the last of the specials that I haven't unlocked yet, but I need to use 2,000 of these to just unlock it so I can see if I like it, and 2,000 currency is huge. Now, I finished this game. I've been playing this quite a bit, and I still barely ever get to 2,000 after like 4 runs or something. It's crazy how expensive these are. So not only are these very expensive in the first place, but the special abilities costing that currency, for me, it should have just been unlocked through progression, not by buying it. I think that is just a bit unfortunate in that regard. Again, like the meta progression does feel good when you do unlock stuff. It's not a huge boost. You don't actually increase your speed. You never get that, which I get. I kind of wish there was maybe more speed to unlock, so you can at least make it so that the gameplay does get more intense outside of just the obstacles later on. I think they could have definitely given more boost as a thing to unlock, but that's just me. I mean, it's not a huge deal. Now, again, I did say that the hub is really nice, but it's pretty empty. I mean, I say this right as I discovered that there was potentially an endless mode here. But ultimately, I do think that right now, when I run around the hub, it feels great. One thing I've realized, and again, this is more on me, and it's not something I'm criticizing, it's just something I kind of am curious if they actually tried, is right now I'm going left to right, and it feels great. And more importantly, check this out. If I go back to the hub, like to all these guys, and I press shift, I stop movement and I just land there. Didn't that look and feel great? Because it did to me. That slowing down and using your boost is just with using shift. You stop and you can dash again, and boom. You don't really ever use that in gameplay. And actually, you can't even use that while you're running naturally because you're going straight. And if you stop at any moment, you're going to die. But I almost find that to be disappointing. Now, some events do use that, but there's not that many events in the game, and you don't really encounter them much. But I just kind of find it a little sad that I'm loving exploring the hub because of going left to right, and that's not the case during gameplay. You're always going straight. Now, again, I get it, and maybe it wouldn't work in any other way. But there's a part of me that wonders, what if there was more moving around left and right every now and then, or like with more events that give you that opportunity? I want to be able to use that shift and just stop wherever I want because it feels great. I kind of want an event where I can do that at least. But again, it's a tiny thing. I just really like how it feels in the hub. In more serious feedback I would give is also information. The game really does not give much information. Now, for instance, I mean, I didn't even know that there was a potential endless mode until I was randomly going through the hub. I didn't know there was crazy accessibility option for the difficulty in the settings. But outside of these two smaller things, items description are not great. Like, they tell you what stats you get very clearly, but you have no idea what those stats really are. There is a luck stat, which I have no idea what luck does. Even the boost, which is is something that you get very, very early, and almost every item has something to do with boost. I still don't fully know what boost is. I get an idea, it probably increases my overall speed, but what does that mean exactly? There's a lot of keywords that they're not really fully explained, which is a shame because there's not that many complicated items or keywords in this game, so there's not much information overall in this game. So I'm kind of disappointed that they don't put a little bit more information overall. And this includes even during gameplay. There's a lot of items that give you boosts, right? So again, like, for instance, if I get a perfect, sometimes it might say, every time you get a perfect, you get a boost. I wish I could see the boost number because there's so many items that can increase your boost. And I want to see how high my boost is at all times. Sometimes I have like 4 different items that give me boosts, and then sometimes if they trigger all at the same time, I might be at 80% boost, 60, 20. I don't know. Also, it's really hard to tell when an active item is active again. Like it's to the right of the energy bar, and there's just a little clock that goes down, and you have to look at it. Like, but it's so hard to tell when it's active. Even for the energy, I kind of wish that there was like a little voice cue potentially that would tell you when you're active or your energy is able to be used again. Maybe there is, but if so, it's not clear enough to me. Overall, I think there can be more to the information. That also goes for the antimatter, which is the currency you get after the finishing a level, right? And I showed how grindy it is to unlock things using that currency. I finished a level, and it just tells me I've gotten 756 of that currency. I'm like, cool. Why do I have that amount? Was it because I went fast? If I go faster, do I get more? If I get more sparks, do I get more? I don't know. Sometimes I just want to unlock more meta progression, so I kind of wish I would know what I need to do to bump up that currency, specifically in this game where everything costs so much. So yeah, I do think they can definitely improve the overall information given to players regarding gameplay and pretty much any other aspect in this game. Some more minor things here and there. You get a lot of loading screens in between levels, obviously, because the levels are pretty short, but you go across a lot of them. Loading screens are just black screen. Kind of wish there was a little, at least, animation. A lot of games do that, where you have a little something in the bottom right of the screen that shows that something's, you know, loading, because currently it's just pure black screen, which yeah, I can hear the music, but it kind of feels like, am I frozen? I kind of wish it was just a little indicator that it's loading. It might seem like a small thing, but considering the fact that you're seeing that black screen all the time, I do think that would actually help make the game feel like it has even better pacing. Similar to this, a retry button, especially at higher shards, I think is a must, because you're going to be sometimes having some really, really bad starts, once again, because I think the beginning of each hard level should start with an item, potentially. In any case, sometimes I just lose a life at the very beginning, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm not going to go on this run where I've lost an entire life, so I want to retry. You can't retry. You have to end, you have to get the ending screen, you have to load, and then you have the animation of coming out of the shard, and then you have to go back in the shard and try again. And once you get really to the end of the game, you're going to be wanting to retry levels. And so that, I think, is an easy thing that they could implement that I really think would help out. Speaking of hard levels, I know they've addressed that in their last patch, but sometimes you get some level layouts that are ridiculously hard. Sometimes you do not, especially at higher levels. I don't think it's a huge deal. It looks like it was a much, much bigger deal last patch. Sometimes it does feel pretty bad when you have some of those insane level layouts. There are some obstacles that just feel much harder than others. The one where they shoot like rockets at, like there's like a little laser that goes and then it just explodes on the floor. That is so much harder than anything else, I think, and sometimes you can't even see the explosions very clearly. You get hit a lot by that. While there's one in the ice world where there's like a bunch of ice shards that fall down, this one's really easy to evade. So some obstacles feel worse than others, and since it's completely random, it can feel a little unfair, but it's not a huge deal, all things considered. It's just something I feel like I should mention. Speaking of difficulty as well, so in this game, you're trying to outrun pretty much the end of the world, which is pretty cool. Like, you have a constant, like, black void that's following you. That black void is a cool concept, I will say. There's something that's really frustrating to me, is that if it gets too close to you, you start taking damage. And you start taking ticking damage. And when you start taking ticking damage, you're like, oh shoot, I'm almost dead. But for some reason, if you just are long enough in the void, you just die. It doesn't matter how much health you have, which I just think is very disappointing, because you keep track of your health and you're like trying to tick away and you're like, okay, I can maybe get out of there, and you're like, oh, I've got a little bit of health left, but maybe I'm gonna get a boost, and you look at your health and it's like super intense, you're almost dead, and then you just die because you were just in the void too long. Why not just, I don't know, make it all about health, you know? It's already extremely hard to get out of it, so the fact that there's just an auto lose if you just spend too long in it or if you're too far back, for me, is just disappointing. It's not a huge deal, it's just kind of disappointing, because I think it's really cool to just try to beat the clock, you know? Like, if you're behind, you've got a little bit of time to survive, and come on, keep track of your health, you can do it. And those moments are really intense and can be really cool, but sometimes when you just die because, oh, the game just thinks you've spent too long in it. Also, if you just randomly hit a wall, boom, like a bad landing, and it completely nullifies your momentum, you're pretty much just dead. If you have a bad landing, that's it. You're just dead. There's like almost no way to recuperate. I kind of wish there was that you could use potentially like the dash from the hub, you know, like, so you have to spend like a second not doing anything at first, but then you get your speed back. I think that would be a cool comeback, because currently, especially in the early game, if you just hit a wall and like not an obstacle, but a full-on wall, and you just bounce backwards, you're just dead. There's nothing you can do about it. And the game doesn't automatically make you lose. You're just gonna be trying to spend the next 10 seconds recuperating something that's impossible. So I kind of wish there was a bit more of a backup in that regard, especially for the early game and for people that are getting more and more comfortable with the game. But yeah, I think overall that's all my little notes and feedback on the game. I think this is a really, really enjoyable game. Gameplay-wise, visually, looks awesome, great music, super, super satisfying, very rewarding skill. Again, like when I really understood how to use the flapping, it felt so freaking awesome. Again, I also have a few things I hope that they change. Personally, the life system, I really, really hope they change that. I mean, I know it would be a massive change for the game, but I do think it would make it much more enjoyable, much more strategic. I wish you could have more items. I wish the endless mode was more fun, at least the endless mode after finishing a shard. I wish there were more boss variety. That's not a huge deal. It's just I like the bosses overall. I think we can do even more stuff with it. Even though I have quite a few notes that I hope they change, I would say Haste is a super fun time. And if you like what you see, odds are you're going to enjoy it too. It feels as good as it looks, I would say. So yeah, that's about it.